Can everybody hear?
You're
Who's joining us remotely?
This is Eric, I can hear.
Excellent, thank you.
I can hear you loud and clear.
Thank you.
all set? Great. Thank you so much, Bill. Well, welcome, everybody. I'm now going to call to order the agenda meeting for October 13th, 2020. I'm quickly going to state for the record that during executive session, the town board entertained a motion on general municipal law 207C applications. Town board approved 6 applications and denied 4. We are withholding the names of the officers due to the fact that they involve confidential medical information. So I just want to state that publicly for the record. And with that said, Councilwoman McGraw does have a brief announcement.
I just want to welcome all the scouts of Troop 37 who are participating in this meeting virtually tonight. We wish you were all here. We hope you will join us at the end of the month. And I look forward to talking with you about your badge that you're working on. And of course, as always, we are all here to answer any kinds of questions that you have about your town government. Thank you, Madam Supervisor.
Great, thank you. Okay, we're going to get started. We're going to start with Chief Wall and Police and Public Safety Committee items.
Okay, number 1 is a ceremonial resolution thanking and honoring Niskayuna Community Action Program, NCAP, for donating alcohol, illegal drugs, tobacco, and e-cigarette prevention signs for installation at various parks throughout the town. Number 2 is a resolution authorizing the supervisor to execute a memorandum of agreement with the Niskayuna Police Benevolent Association to create a successor collective bargaining agreement. It was tabled, Resolution 2020-251. And that's all we have.
Great,
Okay.
thank you. Next up, we have Economic Development, Historic Preservation, and Environmental Conservation Committee items with Laura Robertson.
So our first resolution is a resolution to make a secret determination regarding the improvements to Aqueduct Park. These were the improvements that we discussed at our committee meeting. Rivers Ledge, during their approval for their PUD, agreed to put $250,000 into the Aqueduct Park. It is going to require removal of trees. It's going to require, they want to take all of the blocks of the aqueduct right now that are currently kind of piled along there where nobody can appreciate or see the history and use them in the park. So they want to use them in a couple different ways, like almost like ground level so you can walk across the aqueduct, like as retaining walls so you can kind of see how it looked, built, and then potentially as some structures for sitting. And they will do a replanting plan and, quite a bit of infrastructure, including a couple pavilions and upgrades to the parking lot. They have planned a couple of kind of patio areas that they would carve into the park to be looking out at the river. It's probably over budget. So we had talked about maybe doing a brick program or something to kind of fund that. It can all be designed. It can be left, ready to go. And then when we ever get the ability to do that, we can add that in. But because it's on Canal Corps land and it does require a fair amount of permits, we have to do a secret determination for all the parkland improvements, separate and apart from the secret determination that we did on our grants. So that's why that's on there. The Conservation Advisory Council meeting was on October 7th, and we only had a quorum for, I would say, probably 25 minutes because the majority of the CAC members did not have power, and they weren't able to take action on their secret recommendation to you guys on this. So there's a possibility that it would have to get delayed. If we can do a special meeting in time, we will. But we weren't able to take formal action because so many people had their batteries were dying and they didn't have any other way to plug them in, and not a lot of people have landlines anymore. So does anybody have any questions on that one? Okay. Number 4 is the follow-up to the code that allows a certain number of hens in the town of Niskayuna, and that is establishing fees for the permitting. I think we agreed that we're going to use the regular building permit fee structure for the initial permit itself, and then we'll just use our regular annual fee of $25 to renew that permit every year. That's very standard. Doesn't fully cover the cost of us maintaining that program, but it is in line with the type of fees that we collect currently. So it's not like exorbitant or above what we normally do. Any questions on that one?
Yeah, Laura, why are we not actually, I know there was discussion, you guys have had discussion, why are we not actually trying to come up with a fee structure that will cover the costs of it? Is it,
I mean, we don't do that for any of our building permits.
so that's why,
Yeah, so I mean, it is up to you guys, but this is in line with what we would collect for like, any other permit.
how far off have you done the actual math to know what the difference is, what we're not covering?
Well, I mean, if you just look at, the building department budget, like our revenue sources, our payroll and stuff like that, it doesn't quite cover it already. So if you're adding work to it.
Well, I'll have to take a look. I just had no idea what the difference was.
What about neighboring towns or cities? What do they charge? Fee?
I don't know, but for their chicken permits, yeah, I don't know the answer to that.
So again, I mention it because obviously given our fiscal situation, moving forward, obviously it'd be nice to be able to cover more of our costs. We had a discussion earlier about fees for yard waste.
Yeah, I mean, a little bit of this conjecture, like if we fold this into the regular building permits and it's really not an awful lot of extra work for us, then I don't know why we would have a different fee if it ends up being substantially difficult for us to manage and it's taking a lot of extra time and it's causing comp time or whatever the case may be that we can't get our regular workload done. I mean, then maybe we would look at adjusting the fee, but I would think that unless we kind of want to have a universal adjustment of fees, I mean, I know that you are enacting this code and potentially because you're enacting it, then you want to make that fair and balanced, but maybe you want to let this one go under the current system. And then if the current system is a little bit low, you want to make the whole system fair and balanced rather than singling out people who are taking out chicken permits.
I was all for singling out the chicken.
Yeah, because
permits.
we're adopting.
So that's what I advocated for the 4, 5, 6 months that we discussed this in this Councilman Delarada's committee. If he has anything to say, now would be a good time. But you felt as though it would be easier for your department to do it this way, at least from the get-go, as opposed to doing a whole new fee schedule and a whole new code schedule.
Yeah.
But then we would reevaluate this probably next year at this time and see how much, because I am not for it just being another $25. I do think it's going to be more work. I am disappointed that the budget doesn't have an animal control officer in it, a legit one, and not just a dog warden, those kind of things. And I think all of this raises that. I think we're going to see more fox and things like that. But we defer to you because it is your budget and it is your workforce, so we're going to man this. So
that was the idea, to reevaluate in 6 months' time. But I think it would be difficult to, you'd have to then do a department-wide fee structure if you wanted to go back and try to make the fees equal to the amount of work that the building department's putting into it. You probably have a big increase in fees across the board, and I don't know if that's the right way to go, but certainly can be discussed.
And number 5, the biggie, a resolution awarding a contract for River Road Park improvements to CFI Construction. I've got in parentheses on there $623,000. I had sent you guys out an email, like kind of letting you guys know what the timeline was and potentially what the over budget was. I did actually do some actuals, right? So we spent about $61,000 already. That's for engineering and surveying. The engineering was for all 3 phases of the River Road Park upgrades. So just a reminder, we wanted to look at what the total would take to get this park like up and running to be, kind of equivalent to like the Indian Meadows Park or wherever they have these fields that kind of attract large number of peoples and service these events. And we broke it down into 3 phases. And we got a grant from PhilStack for $250,000, and we bonded for $250,000. And then the softball club.
Yep.
was going to fundraise $75,000, but that's really for stuff that is not included in our contract. So I really just consider our budget to be $500,000. The initial budget did include the $56,000 that we spent on engineering. It didn't include the surveying. We were hoping we had some on our file. We did not. So the surveying was an incurred cost. We're essentially covering everything that we need or that we had outlined and required to be covered in phase one with the contract that we put out, with the exception that we had to remove the parking and that we kind of flip-flop what we were doing with field 2 and field 3. And also, like the initial engineering estimate for this was actually $1 million. So I know that you guys get a little frustrated when things come in over budget, but we literally shaved absolutely everything that we could off of this. And one of the things that the engineer noted and the reason why our original budget was low was because we had water sources, spigots, kind of utilities as an unknown. And they said the utility connections were long and were quite expensive. So we didn't budget properly for utility connections. We didn't have in our budget erosion and sediment control, restoration and disturbance of established lawns outside of fields, the earthwork that was required, amendments to the existing infield mix, and modification to the underground structures for stormwater management. The other big thing that changed and that we worked with on the softball club on this was that we originally thought it was going to be sand slit drainage, but the engineer looked at it and had a long conversation with our engineering department, highway, and the rowing softball club. And they essentially said that sand slit drainage is just a waste of money, like just because of our soils and the fines that we have in our soils. If we were to put those sand slit drainages in, they would only last a year or two, no matter what you did, pretty much, because fines are just such a pain in the butt, would fill in, and then you'd be in the exact same situation that you were in before. So they really felt like that was not a way to drain these fields. It was not a permanent solution. And so they designed the under drainage, which is more expensive. The softball club was willing to take out some of the things that they had in the grant in order to provide for, something that would last and good value for our money. But again, it did come in over budget. So we looked at the additional engineering, which would be including the SWIP, the bidding and construction inspection, and gave that one the go ahead, I think 2 months ago, so that we could do the bidding. And then the construction came in at $578,000 to do fields 1 and 3, bathrooms, utility storage shed, pad, pavilion, and paths. And the additional $45,000 is the underdrain to field 1, which is a really good price for underdrains. The one thing that's not in here is when we were shaving it down is the purchase of the pavilion. So it would be ready to go. And we have lots of quotes for pavilions, but the pavilion would also be an additional, like we were estimating about $45,000. So our budget is $500,000. The absolute worst case scenario at this point, I think, is $668,000, and that's real numbers. So that's my update. If anybody has any questions.
I had a couple of questions. One, you were talking about some savings from the bathroom, I think, in one of the emails.
Yeah, it's possible. I'm not guaranteeing it.
So right. So where are you getting that, and what might we be looking at in terms of savings if we do something different there?
The engineers felt that buying a prefabricated bathroom and placing it on the park would be a substantial savings to the contract. When the bids came in, the bidders weren't required to do line items, so it's a lump sum. So we don't exactly know what the bid was for the bathrooms and how high that is, but they suspect that if you do a prefab and you just drop it down on a slab of concrete, it'll be cheaper than the stick built, which we've been doing. But like I did put in my email, like we tried to do the prefab for aqueduct and did not end up being cheaper. So Barton and Judas, they may have a way of doing that ends up being comparable or slightly cheaper, but I wouldn't expect like $100,000 of savings.
So the difference obviously would have to come out of fund balance, right, to go forward with this.
Yeah, I mean, when we had a question of it being over budget, I can't remember where we were. That was in your meeting, right? And we had thought maybe fund balance. And then I don't know how it works. Like if you can roll that into your bond that you bonded already, if you can add in the $250,000. I don't really know how that works. I did put in my email to you guys a recommendation. I think with the uncertainty with construction and the timing with, grants and everything that's going on in the world, I don't actually think this is going to get cheaper. And I do think that we've pared it down to almost the minimum that you can do on phase one. And so I know you guys are in a tight spot and it's got to be awful. But I hate losing grant money too, and we've already spent some. So I guess my recommendation would be to move forward. And if you're looking at carving something out, we could have a conversation about carving something out. I'm not really sure what you could carve out without having the public benefits and the long-term upgrades to the fields that are really required with something like this.
What does our comptroller say about the, funding then? I mean, how are we going to do this?
Right now, as you know, we had voted this year. So
Thanks, Laura.
Bill, hear you.
No, you can take it.
Will it go on that one? Is that what, is it on?
I don't know. Thank you. As I've mentioned before, that due to COVID, our revenues on an estimated basis, I'm looking at this year and I would say about $1 million lower than what we're expecting for this year. Again, that's a very preliminary estimate that I'm giving you. Next year is even tougher. The state is, what we hear from the comptroller's office, our state aid and CHIPS money and other aid will probably be reduced by 20%. I hate, like Laura, I hate to lose money, free money, $250,000, and we have already bonded $250,000. But I don't know what is the life of this grant is. Is it like if we don't do it this year, do we lose it? And we look at other avenues. I mean, $500,000 is, we are talking about, few people's employee salaries over here and a few points on our taxes. So my suggestion would be to wait and see what the year end looks like, and then make a decision based upon this year's budget hole and next year's fiscal stress. That would be my recommendation at this time. But it's, again, your decision. I mean, this is a big amount. We have already asking for a lot of fund balance to be used for next year to help with the situation. And so that just adds more stress on our fiscal condition.
So Laura, you heard what the comptroller said, right?
Right.
And, we've gone quite a ways down the road on this project,
Quite a way.
right?
Yes.
And you're saying to us that you've worked it the best that you can and it's 623 on this paper, but then you said 658.
Yeah. So, we've carved it down from millions down to what this is. But I was double checking and getting you guys real numbers so that we could have this conversation and realize that when we were carving this thing down to the bare bones, it didn't include the pavilion. I don't think that it's the end of the world to not have the pavilion, but if you wanted to make sure that you were literally targeting every single thing on phase one, that's why I'm saying worst case scenario. You've got actually $45,000 in additive alternative to not install the under drains on field one.
But that's the whole, the project was being done to improve the drainage there.
Right.
We're not going to do that. Why do a project if it's not going to be
Yeah,
right?
and that's a good price. I mean, the contractor's out there doing the drainage on field three, like why wouldn't you have them pop over to field one? And then you have $45,000 for a pavilion, which you could prep it and have the concrete down, which is all included in the contract. And then, purchase the pavilion, like maybe, when you've got the plans out and you've got everything in a grant except for $20,000 or $40,000. A lot of times that's something that you can easily get like from the county or from an item. Like one of the things in the bid was to put the high netting in, and we have a county grant right now to do the high netting. So that actually took $20,000 off this contract. And Ray incredibly nicely said, I know you're over budget already. We'll do this. So, that's $20,000 that he's taking on because he can. But you'd think that like you might be able to find the pavilion money. So if you carve out the pavilion, 66 is absolute worst case scenario. You can carve stuff off of that.
What is the life of this grant? Usually they give us multiple years, right?
Yeah, yeah. And just as a point, and we talked about this a little bit, is that the fall construction on the fields is convenient, I would say, because, we run summer programs in River Road Park. There's tournaments and things that go on. So it becomes much harder to fit that drainage and that construction window into how we use that park, in the spring and summer. Fall is an excellent window to put it in. So, so the timing wise for the way that we use the park works very well now. I think that potentially, you would probably have to wait until next fall. You'd have to go a whole season, with the existing problems that are out there. Working with the rowing club is very difficult to fit these projects in with parks that are constantly in use. It's tough. Everybody wants a piece of it. So,
Can you show us a little breakdown then of this project and what you gave us some numbers about no pavilion, bathroom, so that we can.
Yeah.
We don't have the money.
well, we have 500,000.
We
right?
heard
We're
it from
talking
the,
about.
well, I know that, but we have our controller telling us that.
That's $500,000. I mean, they're
So we have $500,000.
Yeah, we have the half a million. We
bonded
don't
for it.
have the 123.
Yeah.
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 So we don't have the 623, right?
Yeah, but that's not over. I mean, we have 500 of that.
Okay.
Right, we don't have 123. So it still goes to your point. I mean, that's a point and a half of a tax
On the
increase.
taxes.
Yeah.
Right. I brought the plans. Do you want me to pass them around? Or do you want me to email them to you guys later?
No, that's fine. Just email it later. And
Okay.
again, it's dollars. So break down the dollars best that you can.
Yeah, we have the engineer's estimate of breaking down. The engineer's estimate when we went out to bid was under 500. But their recommendation to award to GFI, they're the lowest bidder. And we got a good number of bids, I think 6. They're the lowest bidder by $100,000. So they do feel like that is a good indicator of what the costs probably are. And then that is also a good price. So if you guys have any more questions, I'll email you these. I can email you the things that we shaved off. I know you're in a
Right,
tough
but you want the
spot.
list of each. I think what Bill is saying, are we all straight? Bill wants every piece of it and what the price amount is, and then he's, like he's doing his family budget, right? They're not gonna go on vacation this year, or they're not gonna.
We're all doing that, right? So we
Yeah,
have to do
no,
that here.
Yeah.
But that was what you were actually asking for. You weren't asking for the pictures. So I just
Oh.
want to make sure.
You did. We had a lot of discussions about what to keep in and what to keep out.
Yeah, this
you
has
could
been going on
easily
for-
carve out the bathroom, but then there was a perception that if you carve out that, that extra bathroom, you're not providing the proper, public benefit to this grant and stuff. So we really went back and forth on what had to be in and out. It's been a really long process.
No, and you've worked really hard, and obviously, it's a great benefit, but we got to figure out the money.
Yeah.
Thanks, though, Laura.
Yep. I'll send you guys as much as I have. I printed it all out tonight so you can have it. And then I'm verbally adding one. We've got a new videographer back there, John Castle. He's learning from Bill. He's, I think, already doing a great job. I had like a 5-minute conversation with him. Very impressed. So he worked for us over the summer. He doesn't need any additional paperwork or anything, but we do need a resolution appointing him as the videographer, and then it would be retroactive to today because he started working today.
Number 18.
Oh, sorry. I did not have the updated one. Good to have somebody in the room again.
Laura,
Thanks,
could
Laura.
you stay for this next one, actually?
Oh, sure. Next one is the resolution establishing a youth representative on the town advisory committee's policy for the town of Niskayuna. Sorry, I didn't read that very well. So essentially what we talked about at the highway meeting was there's a lot of interest from youth, high schoolers, college kids that are interested in, like, I've had interest in the Climate Smart Communities Task Force. I think there's been some interest in some of the other ones. And
Can you talk a little louder and a little slower? There are a dozen Boy Scouts on the video, and they might be interested in this, so.
Okay, so the youth, so we've just had interest from a new generation on some of our committees, and we felt like designating a spot, like They wouldn't go on any committees that had a vote or anything, but they would be, they'd be good listening, good educational experience, great on resumes. And then they would also obviously be allowed to share. So you'd get a new perspective, a new generation on some of our boards, which I think would be really valuable and beneficial. So I think we were just talking about, like, because the initial interest was in the Climate Smart Communities Task Force. There's been some interest in the other ones. There's definitely some kids over at the high school that have, reached out to the Conservation Advisory Council on the wetlands that are across the street from us and stuff like that. So I definitely think that there's interest out there, and it's, beneficial to the town to have a youth kind of seat designated on some of these advisory committees. And then also good to be hearing from them and making sure that we're staying relevant and incorporating all perspectives. So
Thanks.
the idea was right. I think we come up with a policy that would designate a seat on a couple of the boards that you guys are comfortable
So
with.
you're going to work on that because we haven't talked about it in John's committee yet, but you're going to?
I can, yeah.
Yep. That'd be
We,
great.
we talked about it at Highway. I had brought it up at Finance last month. And then Laura had reached out to me. She said, I heard you talking about it. I've had some interest even. So we identified some committees, and it'll, finalize it in the resolution. To Laura's point, it would be committees that don't have a vote. And so we were not talking about the planning board or the zoning board or anything like that, but these sort of advisory committees. I went back and looked at all the resolutions creating these, and pretty straightforward. Folks just, come in and weigh in. And to your point, they would, not only it's a learning experience for them, but it's also providing a youth voice. So, so the resolution would be, we said we'd pilot it. I think we identified 4 or 5.
Yeah, I think we're thinking
committees?
Complete Streets, Tree Council, Climate Smart Communities Task Force, and Conservation Advisory Council.
Yeah. So we would pilot it and see how it goes, and then hopefully expand our youth voice and youth representatives at other advisory committees from there. So, yep. Thanks, Laura.
Yep. Great. We did actually lose another member of our tree council to a new job, which is great for them, not so good for us. So we have a new spot open on tree council if anybody knows anybody.
Oh, great. Thanks, Laura.
Good evening, everyone. So I'm speaking to item 7, a resolution authorizing the supervisor to execute an addendum to a license agreement with Niskuna Girls Softball. There's an existing license agreement we entered into in 2017 with a 6-year term for use of River Road Park between April and November 1st of each year, which they currently pay us $2,000 with each year a $100 increase to the fee. They've approached us and asked to add as an addendum to that license agreement a change to the premises so as to include Avon Crest Park. In exchange for adding Avon Crest Park, they're willing to pay a fee of $500 per year. They're also willing to maintain the fields spring, fall, and the summer, and make substantial improvements, which Councilwoman Jakewith and Ray Smith are aware of, such as laser leveling the outfields, changing the fencing. They want to install a shed, which obviously would have to be improved by Ray Smith and would become property of the town. There'll have to be some language in there that addresses how they're right during the playground camps, because I know that's been an existing problem at River Road, and I'm sure it would also similarly be a problem at Avon Crest given the size. So we've been negotiating this for about, I'd say, 3 months, and I think we finally have come to somewhat of a reasonable solution. I'm not sure if they're looking to start playing immediately, or if they're not, or if they want to just start this license agreement come January 1st. That's something that I'll have to talk to Dave Aberkin about. I think the reason why the town board should just take this into consideration is because I know that Avon Crest Park is a small park and there is limited space at this point. But I mean, it seems like a good opportunity to take a field that's in pretty dire need of maintenance and make it usable. So that's that item. Does anybody have any questions or objections to that license agreement? Okay.
Thanks, Alexis.
Number 8 is a resolution appointing a project aide at the senior center. This is not a new position. It's just a retitle of a current employee. It was Vito Caruso who was working in the kitchen. And as I discussed earlier, we're revamping our food plan at the center, no longer making meals, but just purchasing meals. So there was no need to have Vito work in the kitchen, but he's been a huge help cleaning and doing all the tasks that actually the girls are unable to get to. So they said he's invaluable, and this is more of just a title change and a little tiny bump up to minimum wage to make him know he's respected. So
He wouldn't happen to be a judge, would he? There's a
no, I don't
judge, right?
believe he is.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, I don't believe he is.
Okay, thank you.
And number 9 is a resolution authorizing a purchase of the installation of 4 UVC upper air glow 310 fixtures at the rec center. As I explained in finance, at this time of year and due to COVID, without being able to have the windows open, they're not able to run exercise programs at the senior center or anyone for that matter, unless the windows can be open. And as the weather's about to change and they won't have proper ventilation, they are going to need these 4 units installed at a cost of $7,800, which I did have in my budget. Charlie Bergami said they will install them, but he will just make sure that there's enough, there's a power outlet for each unit. But it's something that if we don't have it, they're unable to do exercise programs or run anything upstairs during the winter months.
And Lori, these are necessary there because of the old HVAC system, that he can't make any other adjustments. Is that correct? You mentioned that earlier.
Exactly. Yeah, Charlie said that they're able to have enough airflow and the HVAC system works downstairs, but upstairs, due to the size of the filters that they would need, he said it would just clog up the system and actually hurt the system. And he said this was the most cost-effective approach. He did find, originally the quote was $14,000 and was able to find 4 larger units at a cost of $7,800.
Do we know what the participation is with the exercise programs now that we're in this COVID area? Is it getting better? Do you know what the numbers are?
Well, they haven't started it up yet. They've been kind of basing everything downstairs and they're starting to trickle upstairs. I will say that I started a adult Tai Chi program, and he has 10 participants, which I think in this climate is pretty good. People are still a little leery, but it's definitely something that they're going to need to have to run any kind of program, pickleball or bocce or anything upstairs. And also these units are portable. Should we ever get a new rec center, they can be brought with us, should we still need them.
Thank you.
That's a bonus. Does anybody have any questions? No? Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Lori.
Thanks, Laura.
Oh, wait, I'm sorry, I do have one that I forgot to add. A ceremonial resolution for Ann Tracy and Ken Brown. As I said, we're no longer having they're now no longer cooking meals, and Ken and Ann both worked in the kitchen. So we'd like to have a ceremonial resolution recognizing them for all their years of service. And they've been here
Wonderful.
forever.
Yep,
And now that we're finally in person, we thought it was a good time to do it.
that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Lori. Okay, next we have Finance and General Government Committee items, and we have Ismat Alam.
Thank you. We talked about all of these items a little while ago in our finance committee. The first one I have is a resolution making certain budgetary modifications, except for one that we are going to do a major legislation and send it to the council at the next meeting. A resolution adopting the town of Niskuna use of social media policy, which was sent to us by our law department. The next one is, can't hear me? Oopsie, okay. A resolution authorizing the supervisor to execute a letter of engagement with Gervin for Lazo, our lawyers on retainer, for legal services concerning labor and employment matters. a resolution adopting the revised retention and disposition of schedule for New York local government records. And Alexis, you want to talk a little bit about it?
Just for those of you who didn't tune into the Finance and General Government Committee meeting, this is a legal requirement through New York State. There's been major revisions to the record retention and disposition schedule that governs when and at what period of time a town may get rid of certain archival records. So took effect August 1st, and town board must adopt a resolution adopting this revised schedule by January 1st, absolute latest.
Thank you. Next one is just a housekeeping item that we do it on an yearly basis. A resolution establishing the standard workday for elected and appointed officials. And the last one is my favorite, a resolution calling for public hearing on the preliminary budget of the town of Niskuna for 2021. Thank you. Any questions about anything? Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next we have Public Works Committee items with Matt Yetto.
Okay, number 19 is a resolution authorizing the supervisor to sign a utility easement agreement for 1067 Lamplighter Road. The property owner wants to install a retaining wall that will encroach into a town drainage easement. We've reviewed it, my office and Ray's office as well, and it's approved from our standpoint. 20 is similar resolution. It's for to approve a utility easement agreement for 2 and 6 Gerard Drive. It's to allow for the installation of water services and driveways in an existing sanitary sewer easement. 21 is a resolution awarding a contract to build a roof structure over the new fuel station at the water and sewer garage. 22 is a resolution awarding a contract to install a flow meter and a meter vault at the Valley Drive sewer pump station. This is funded part by the operating budget and also from bonded money from a few years ago. 23 is a resolution awarding a contract to install an insertion valve in our water distribution system. It's a large diameter valve. There's money in our 2000 line in the water distribution earmarked for that work. We have multiple quotes and we're prepared to make a recommendation. 24 is a resolution that corrects the reconciliation that was approved recently for the second half of 2019 for the utility bills, for the residential utility bills. It was a matter of $2.40 that was a glitch in the software, which has been resolved, but so they carried into the reconciliation and then into the next item down, which is for the warrant, because that carries over late fees. So that's what those two resolutions have to do with. And 26 is a resolution that would approve the corporate utility reconciliation for the second quarter of 2020. I have the numbers. Kathy in my office is reviewing those so that we won't miss the $2.40 if it's there again. But it's pretty straightforward. Any questions?
No?
Thank you.
Thank you, Matt.
Thanks, Matt. Okay, for all of our department heads that are joining us via phone, if anybody has anything that they would like to add, if there are any items for the agenda to add, you can do so now. Okay. Are there any other questions, additions, or subtractions? All right. Well, this is a good maiden voyage. Thank you all for joining us here. It was a little scary, I know, getting us all back together in one room, but I think it worked out. So I'm going to make a motion to adjourn for the evening. If I could have a second on that motion.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor signified by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? We're adjourned for the evening. Thank you all. Have a wonderful night.